Today I'll be talking about the SAT reading section, command of evidence questions. So let's begin. So what are these questions about? So the main thing that these questions will be asking is to basically give a multiple choice version of an answer, cite, and explain problem. The ones that you see in your English class or your history class, maybe even science or math. So what these questions do is that they give two questions. And one of these is asking something about the passage, like the narrator's opinion on something or how the narrator acts. And then another question asks for evidence in the form of quotes from the passage in order to prove your previous answer choice. So how do you do it? Sorry. So first, what I would recommend is that you mark and annotate all the quotes that are given into the passage. This just helps save time, and it also makes your work more efficient due to the SAT being a time test. Next, I would underline what the first question is asking for and use the quotes to see if they have any form of relevance to the question. And lastly, if you find one that does, then try to use that question choice or the question choices to see which fits with the quote's theme the best. And how do you succeed with these problems? So the first thing I would recommend is for you to focus, because focusing just helps. And whatever you have to do to focus, I would recommend doing it because it just helps you stay on task and make sure that you don't make mistakes. The next thing I would recommend is to skim the passage beforehand. This gives you a general idea of where X idea in the passage is, and it helps streamline your search down. And then lastly, I would read a few lines before and after the quote in order to gain a bit of context into what you're talking about if you haven't skimmed it. And one more thing is to just stay calm, as not staying calm will just make your life harder, and it's not good for you taking such tests. So let's continue. This is from SAT Practice Test 8, and I'll link that down below. So let's try to do this problem. So I'll change my color to something more vibrant, I guess, probably red. Okay, so first thing you have to do is mark all the quotes. You have lines 24 to 27, 35 to 37, 37 to 38, and 59 to 67. Sorry, 61. Just do it as it just makes your life easier. So 24 to 27. So this one, my father to the other children. The next one is 35 to 37, the bookseller to content. That's here, or content. And then 37 to 38 is he hardly ever allowed me to pay for the books he placed in my hands. And then 59 to 61 is that afternoon to see it. Next, I would, skim the passage. So basically, I already did this before making this video. So basically, if you want, I would recommend you pause it before doing it, but then what basically it's about is it's about like a kid who's basically liking books while his father dislikes it. And so the thing that you got to know for this sort of question is you got to know that like his father doesn't like books. And that's shown in line 11 with my father didn't like to see books in the house. And then once he caught me reading at night and flew into a rage. So he hates books. Don't know why, but then he just dislikes it for some reason. So then now you have to underline, or I would recommend doing so, with which of the following statements about his father would the narrator most likely agree with. So the thing is, you just have to read the quotes. So let's do the first one, 24 to 27. My father was not a miser. So he was not a miser. So he doesn't like to use any unnecessary form of money. So this is from the passage, and it proves that like his father he would have disliked any unnecessary use of money, which is false. So you can cross B out. So B is not answer choice. And then also, despite the hardships we suffered, whenever he could give me a few coins so that I could buy myself some treats, like the other children. And so his family had hardships, so they couldn't spend enough money for stuff, and they didn't have enough money to probably like get things. But then his father gave him money in order to get candy, but then he got books. So basically, that kind of takes out that he lacked affection for the narrator, because basically that just means like it's antithetical to what he's saying. And now I would recommend moving to which quotes are not proving any help. So basically now let's check the other quotes. So this one, the bookseller would let me sit on a chair in a corner and read any book that I like to for my heart's content. And then he hardly ever allowed me to pay for the books he placed in my hands. And so for these two quotes, they provide no form of context, and they don't matter, honestly. They're just extras, and they don't like really matter for the sake of what the question is asking. So you can take out B and C. This one, my father was not a miser, and despite the hardships we suffered, whenever he could give me a few coins so that I could buy myself some treats like the other children, it doesn't also, like, it doesn't connect to the question prompts. So it doesn't mean like he would object to the writing of Charles Dickens, and he would not have approved the same praise gift. But then the things saying he doesn't like books are above, so those don't matter. So this one, 24 to 27, wouldn't matter because it has no relevance. So you only have option choice D. So that's our answer. So let's see what D says. So that afternoon, I took my new friend home, hidden under my clothes so that my father wouldn't see it. So what is that new friend? So I would recommend reading from lines 47 to over here, just so you can gain the context. So basically what this talks about is Sempre, who is the bookstore owner, I believe, giving the narrator a gift, which is a book by Charles Dickens. And so basically his father does not like it. And so what's in the text is that it's saying that my father wouldn't see it. It shows that his father wouldn't have approved of that gift because it's a friend. So he's basically referring that my new friend is the book. And so his father wouldn't have approved of that friend, which is the gift that Sempre gave. So that takes out option choice D and then keeps C. Since there's basically nothing about Charles Dickens and his father disapproving of Charles Dickens, he just doesn't like books. So that's how you do something like this. And I have another problem. So sorry if it's a little bit convoluted, but it just needs a bit of practice and then you'll get the hang of it. This is probably one of the more easier topics. So yeah, so I'll clear all drawings and I'll move on to the next. Okay, so now let's do number 3 and 4. Sorry, 43 and 44 from passage. Sorry, practice test 8. Sorry, my throat's kind of acting weird. So again, what I would do first is mark all the quotes. So 3 to 7. Closing to time. And then 7 to 11, the large to across the trap here. 7 to 11, and then if the insect touches one more hair, into action. And then lastly, 16 to 18. Now that we got all the quotes, I would recommend you then basically underline the main thing it's asking for. So based on the passage, a significant advantage of the Venus flytrap's requirement for multiple triggers is that it does X. So these are the prompts, and it has one of them have to be right. So I would recommend reading it and then just taking out options. So let's read the first quote. Closing its trap requires a huge expense of energy, and reopening the trap can take several hours. So Diodena only wants to spring closed when it's sure that the dwelling insect visiting its surface is large enough to be worth its time. So we have that. So it's asking for why it has that requirement and what's the advantage of it. So the problem is that the reopening of the trap takes a long time and it requires a huge amount of energy. So it basically is like a trigger sensor of sorts. So this may be a choice. So option B, so the large black hairs on the lobes allow the Venus flytraps to literally feel their prey, and they act as triggers that spring the trap closed when the proper prey makes its way across the trap. So it doesn't give an advantage. It basically explains what it does, and we don't need an explanation, so we can choose out option B. So let's do C. If the insect touches just one hair, the trap will not spring shut, but a large enough bug will likely touch two hairs within about. This explains, doesn't give an advantage. And lastly, D. First, the fly trap encodes the information, forms the memory that something it doesn't know what has touched its air. And explanation, like all of these are explanations except A. A gives a reason for why it has that advantage. So we can choose A as the correct option for 44. Now what we have to do is we have to see what 43 wants from 44. And so let's read the question for 43 again. So based on the passage, a significant advantage of the Venus flytrap's requirement for multiple triggers is that it, so again, requires a huge expense of energy, and reopening the trap can take hours. So then it only wants to spring closed when it's sure that the dwelling insect is large enough to be worth its time. So is that it enables the plant to identify the species of its prey. No, that's not true. It doesn't give anything about that within the quote. Conserves the plant's calcium reserves. That's a bit too narrow. So it doesn't say anything about calcium, so I would not choose that. So safeguards the plant's energy supply. So it requires a huge expense of energy, and reopening the trap takes time. So it doesn't have much energy. So I think C would be the best choice. So let's just put a tick mark over there. And then D, prevents the plant from closing before capturing its prey. Not so sure about that one because it's not related to the other two. So, and it's not related to the quote. So I believe option choice C would be the best for 43. So there you have it. And I would recommend when doing more of these sort of questions, I would try to work on, well, not using the timing limit and just working on getting those questions right. Because after a certain amount of time, it's just going to come as second memory, and it'll just be easier the more and more you do it. And the College Board has a ton of SAT resources along with Khan Academy giving a huge load of it. And so I would recommend doing those. And frankly, the biggest tip I can give, which I forgot to put, is to do the test on paper, because the actual test is on paper and it'll help out with both your hands endurance along with making sure you annotate more, which is important when doing this. So I guess that's pretty much it. So I will see you later. So stay safe.